nobody's saying let's get rid of freedom of the press. You know, and these are things that don't exist in Iran today, right? So I think this is part of that political culture that we're talking about, and it's regardless of what your political persuasion is, whether you're right, middle, or left, that you have this idea that this is the basis upon which we want to begin. And you gotta start talking about that, I think. And then you can start talking about structures and institutions and how they're supposed to function. But I'll stop there and land this plane. Thank you.
That's really interesting.
And then another question I have on that is, in 2025, what does regime overthrow and building in a new, I don't know, would it be a monarch? Would it be the parliamentary system with a strong monarch, like it, is kind of maybe set up to be now? And then you just have you have Russia injecting their interests, you have China theirs, you have the U.S. theirs in the center of the globe, kind of, and just in terms of information and building something, and we can't even decide as Americans if we're for or against the IRGC. It seems like in conversations like these, and so how much political will is even here. Then you get a new president with a new plan. Like it's scary. Of what it would look like. We all like to be idealistic, but we've seen so many things go wrong when stuff like that happens. And so I have a bit of cynicism about the optimism sometimes I hear about what would come next.
Maybe we should try and take a practical bet to it and ask the questions that would come up in those issues. So I think it's really, really interesting out there, in particularly how you're talking about premising operating on agreement. I think just as a former door-to-door salesman, and you can't underestimate the power of people's positive thinking about things. It premises them for all sorts of agreement, or sets them up to be ready for all sorts of kinds of agreement. But what are the practical hurdles that you run into in that situation? For example, how might one gain consensus or find a fair tax policy? I say that because at the start of the U.S., we had the Articles of Confederation before we moved to the Constitution. Excuse me. And the Articles of Confederation were quite restrictive, require unison essentially from all 13 colonies. And so it really didn't work as a governing document. If we're kind of sketching this out and we're taking what I'm calling a practical back to it, which really just is like practical considerations, what do you think some of those practical considerations might be? Arthur, that was meant for you, if I didn't make it clear.
Yeah, no. I mean, look, one of those things that are a thread related to those initial principles by which you establish a new government are your values. And there may be an idea that we can refer to as universal values, right? But there's also something that's tied to your culture. Persian culture is a deep and rich and much older and highly developed intellectual culture. And
assume for purposes of talking to me, that have the exact same knowledge, but that we're relatively close. I love history and enjoy occasionally reading Annabis, if that gives you kind of an idea of my understanding of the region.
There are great leaders and writers that have literally, people, I wouldn't say worship them, but they could cite poetry at the drop of a hat based on these individual writers that wrote things hundreds of years before Shakespeare.
I think that...
And so my point about this is that we could give certain ideas to say, it should be based on individual liberty and freedom, or a free press, or you name it. You know, these sort of ideas that we associate as, you know, sacrosanct in our society. Like, how dare you tell me I can't speak out? And that may be one of them. I don't know.
How do you
yeah.
verify concepts? I really wish Moya was here. She would be
It
so.
has to come from the people. It has to come from the people. It has to come from
the people.
Yeah.
The people en masse, as in Thomas Jefferson's "The Tree of Liberty must be watered with blood every 20 years."
No. I'm talking about the people who are thought leaders, the people who are intellectuals, the people who are, and I dare say, spiritual leaders. But you know that has a lot of connotations, especially when we're talking about a very, very extreme and brutal fundamentalist Islamic regime. And I say that as a Muslim myself, right? There's all brands of Islam, and there's all brands of Christianity or Judaism.
I think it's.
Okay,
I think it is fair to say that our task here is not with Islam. It is not with 30-point-some-odd billion Muslims, regardless of whether they're Sunni or Shia. Our issue here is where Islamic fundamentalists who would seek to use the religion's name to commit heinous atrocities that they can only draw very tenuous historical links to at best, and even that is sketchy. And they morph out the religion in a perversion in the very same way the Christian fundamentalists in the 1700s went at each other.
Marshall.
Our point here is not.
Marshall, good afternoon. Marshall, good afternoon.
Yeah, there it is.
Sorry, I
interrupted. I interrupted after. You can totally go after.
I want to hear. I'll take my mic and I'll be happy to give it to my friend Shamim. I'll just say very quickly that we need to defer to the Iranian people on this. That's why I would love to see more Iranian people. And here's one of my best ones that I know out there, a good friend of mine, my brother, and that's Shamim. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me? Good morning, afternoon. Author, see, the thing is exactly what you said, but see, the issue is not that, I mean, it is, but the issue fundamentally, I think, for me, is someone who's lived in the West, I don't know, 80, 90% of my life right now. The issue isn't like Persiafying or Iranifying or whatever term you want to use, like the Bill of Rights or something. I think it was that gentleman he left, but Anthony, he was saying, it's funny, his name, I was looking at his name, he said Anthony Edwards. I said, oh, the Anthony Edwards plays for the Timberwolves? I was just kind of joking with him. He said something really nice, or really very on point. He said something to the extent of, he said something about being genuine, and then he said something about, they're very intelligent people, they're living under this regime, and a bunch of other points. I only got like 5 hours of sleep last night, so please bear with me. My answer to you, Marshall, and it's really simple. I don't want to say dumb it down, but because it was a smart question. I'm going to give a dumb answer. I'm going to give a simplistic answer to a very complex question. Your question is very valid, and so is authors. My answer as an Iranian American is very simple. When Cyrus the Great, who is the only monarch, if I may brag about being Iranian, I can brag about this. The only monarch to ever be mentioned in 3 holy books. The Old Testament.
He also bragged about his gardens, if you don't mind.
And,
maybe just a little
there
bit.
you go. Well, his hanging gardens of Babylon, and all the beautiful women.
It's that, and it's the piping system You need
Yes.
to help.
Marshall, my darling, let him go. We're gonna get on a nerdy rabbit hole, and he's got a point to make. So.
The point is, well, it's very simple. No, I love that. The point is, the thing is, Marshall, is all of our political this, all of the brilliance our community has. Texas. I mean, the point is this, Marshall. See, like we're all grown ass. I'll be 36 in August. Shout out to all the Leos. We're all grown ass women and men. We've all, like myself, I moved to Oklahoma when I was 7, almost 8. When I flew into World Rogers World Airport, which God knows why it was called World Airport at the time, I didn't necessarily have a culture shock, but I didn't know what to expect. Now, why am I bringing up this stuff about my personal life that really, I guess, seemingly has nothing to do with this? Well, the reason why is because the average ordinary Iranian that was born after this regime, like myself, I was born in 1989, 10 years after, 11 years after, I guess, technically, the Shah abdicated and such. You've obviously, you're not an idiot. You don't live under a rock. Everybody has access to information and such and all that. You can Google anytime you'd like, anybody here that can hear my voice with my, perfect American accent, might I add. You can go and look up, picture after picture after picture after picture of our girls wearing, pencil skirts and dressing like they were in Paris, France, okay? And, of course, you have, these perverted, disgusting mullahs who come and make everything below the waist and everything sexualized. They're a bunch of perverts. The point I'm trying to make is that we have all the ingredients, my dears. We have all these beautiful girls who, to me, are a bunch of Wonder Women. And they're a bunch of Amazonian warriors who will put you in your place. They don't have the resources. And what President Trump did last night just goes to show you that, this cancer is an issue for all of us. But I'll say this about the political prisoners. There are dozens upon hundreds upon thousands, maybe, probably, tens of thousands, maybe. We don't have the exact number because the IRGC doesn't put out an annual report of human rights and prisoner reports, right? They don't put out a statement saying, well, we fed this many prisoners, this many Baha'is, this many Jews, this many Zoroastrians, this many political dissidents. No, they don't give pardon my French, a fucking shit. They don't give two shits about you. We have all these political prisoners and such. Prisoners of conscience, as I would call them, as everybody calls them, really. You should be calling them prisoners of conscience. You can call them whatever you want. We have all the ingredients, Marshall, my dear, inside of Iran. The issue is this. The issue is that when the Shah was in power, I don't remember it, but my mother, who's 71 now, will tell you, okay, my mom was, about my age, probably younger than me when the revolution happened. She said to me, and I quote, and the hairs on my head, which are whatever's left, because I'm bald now, but the hairs that are left on my bald head, the very little follicles that are still left, stand up when I say this, that it is beyond, I don't know if I should use the word conceivable or inconceivable. There is no place for any sort of regime like this in the world. We understand that. Now, what the future of Iran will look like, I'm not an Iranian Nostradamus, and I'll try to wrap this up because, like I said, I had 5 hours of sleep last night, so I apologize my rambling. But I'll tell you this, Marshall, is all you have to do, and this is why they set Evin prison in Tehran. This is why they set some of the jail cells on fire. A couple of years ago, Otto remembers, they set them on fire. Who set it on fire? The IRGC regime agents who are depraved human creatures. I would involve these people.
Shamim, you were about to say the future of Iran. What would you say for that if you had to put it in a couple bullet points?
Is in the minds, well, it's Iranians, we think in these big philosophical terms, and
I've noticed.
I can't really put it we can't really tell you, but we can show you, and then you can figure out.
But what I'm trying to say is like, okay, for example, I'll just give my own example, okay? I've lived in the United States since I was 7. I speak obviously perfect English. I wouldn't say I'm a perfect person, but my English is pretty damn good. I would say, I would dare use the word immaculate, like the conception of Jesus Christ. Immaculate, that level of English, okay? My Farsi is not the best. It's about 2nd, 3rd grade when it comes to reading and writing. English, vocabulary, speaking, okay, not too bad. Again, I'm not bragging, I'm giving you context. I have nothing to brag about. What I can do to serve my country of birth, because I'm an American citizen, but my country of birth, where I was born in Iran, what I can do, for example, Marshall, is when I go back, and Arthur knows this, because I want to go back to Iran one day, God willing. When I go back, my contribution, as slight and insignificant as I believe it is, possibly could be a decent, 0.5% of help. I can show the people of my generation, millennial, and the generation after me, Gen Z, shout out to Gen Z, I can show them practical steps and practical applications, real life, as we call it IRL, in real life, what democracy looks like, what consultation looks like, what healthy debates, shout out to this room, I just gave you a shameless plug, you're welcome, what a healthy debate looks like. Not necessarily only from an American perspective, because that's the only perspective I know, even though I lived in Israel for about 2 years, in 2012 to 2014. But what it would look like in a 21st century society. Sorry if I was long-winded. I'll wrap it up with this. Why? Because there was a famous interview, I forgot the gentleman's name, he was a British journalist, and I can't recall his name. Remember, I had 4 hours of sleep last night. And I remember, God rest his soul, the late Shah, and they asked him, they said, oh Shah, sir, king, whoever. They said, what is going to happen when this regime, when these mullahs take power and whatever? And these are words that will be etched in all the lobes of my brain forever, for eternity, even after I leave this earthly plane of existence. And the Shah, remember, emphatically said, if these mullahs, or not if, when these, because this is after he obviously abdicated, he had stomach cancer, he was basically on 6 months, maybe to a year from his death, may he rest in peace. And he looked at the guy and he literally said to him in perfect clear English, he said, this regime will take back Iran, will revert, not progress, but regress, will regress Iran back 1,400 years. And that's exactly, Marshall, what happened. Now, how do we bring it 1,400 years and beyond into the future? It's very simple. Again, I'm giving you a very simple answer, or very straightforward answer in my humble opinion. It's the diaspora. Some of us need to go back because they're going to have a fledgling democracy. They're going to have a fledgling economy, and. And if they want to have a thriving nation, may God will it, in the future, people like me and people that are, have been, I don't want to say I wasn't born here, but raised here, need to go back and because they don't have any practical real life experience with that. But they have every right, and just like I have every right, I guess, I would say humbly, to have a say-so. And so that's it.
Thank you so much.
Just as a segue point between what Shamim just said. By the way, Shamim, maybe I regret giving you the mic. I don't know. No, I don't. Okay, I'm glad I did. Seriously, he's my brother.
You should always regret giving me the mic, because I'm gonna tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. I don't give a fuck what you want to hear. Sorry.
Hey,
I'm gonna tell you what you
take
need
your
to hear.
cowboy hat in Texas. It's tight.
I'm joking.
Hey, it's a Stetson, buddy. It was a $300 Stetson, okay? I'm not materialistic, but we can have nice things in this country, okay?
That is a nice Stetson.
No, and thank you, really seriously, Shamim. And the one thing I would say, and one of the reasons I kind of introduced this topic is that when the U.S. went into Iraq and was there eventually for quite a long time, You guys can do the math as to when we went in and then when we got out. It was basically over 15 years, if not 20, I think. 2003-ish until about 2010.
2002 initially.
Till when?
2002 initially.
To 15 or 16, right?
All the way to the initial pullout under the Obama administration in 14.
Okay, so 12 years. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Okay. When we went in, got him, Saddam, out there, let the Iraqis deal with him, which they did, summarily, literally executing him. And we said, here's a blueprint for a democracy. And they actually gave them a lot of information and advice. So these are the structures that you should have. And many of those were applied somewhat blindly to the political culture. And you might think, I think incorrectly, that there's no historical political culture in these places. That would be false. But when you sort of give them a structure that doesn't really align with some of those principles and values by which people did rise up and celebrate as the U.S. went in. They don't take those principles and say, you know what does our future country look like? What we have now is an Iraq that's extremely corrupt. And we have now that's an Iraq that is still extremely divided. And whose economy, in spite of its resources, is actually doing very poorly. So Iran is a much more resource-rich country. It is an intellectually rich country. It is a historically and socially rich country. So this is what I'm talking about. You know, that should be something that we defer to them about. We can offer our advice, we can offer our experience, but it should be based on something that is a lot more rational and in accordance with what the people want. But they're going to have to agree on it. And we know that we also had a violent experience on a fundamental issue in 1861. That was our Civil War. The last thing you want is to have some sort of that kind of division where they don't agree on what that future looks like. So that's my point. And the
Thank
more
God
we hear
for
from
Abraham Lincoln, author. Thank God for Abraham.
and the more Iranians that we have expressing those ideas, I think the better. Obviously, you know, we can share what our experience has been, but it's based on our experience.
So there's that, but there's something that's been in the nagging back of my head, and I'm only about to quote because he is here and I need to be accurate, this being her realm. King Louis XVI was warned by several successive finance ministers about his desperate financial situation. Had several different causes and several different finance ministers. But the point being, Anne Robert Jacques Turgot, Charles Alexander de Calonne, Etienne Charles Lambert de Brenne, and Jacques Necker all advised Louis XVI that his funding was drying up, and he was doing things like funding the American Revolution, which we should be forever thankful for. Thank you, France. But there is this point which is U.S. imperial law just can't go on forever, and it does have to be measured to some extent against what we spend. And that is, I think, an important consideration, noting what we would like to happen in the world. The reason I was asking to take a practical back to the idealistic, this is what would happen, is because when I was growing up, we had this idealistic idea about Iraq. Oh, now that country's going to turn out. And is like great place and bastion of liberal democracy, and shame the reason I said Iranify it is because the United States walked into Iraq. I mean, an artificial country created by the Kitover Agreement in World War I. But we walked in and we imposed Western values. We did things that made success very hard, like getting rid of the entire Iraqi army, which like pushed these guys into the Fed game. But that's like beside the point. The point being, this idea that we would spread U.S. democracy somehow, I think was a faulty notion by George W. And I love George W. He and me are best of friends. No, seriously, never met the guy I always wanted to. But, he just, we had this problem where we, dumped in, and it's, it was not helpful for us. So it has to be measured against U.S. debt, against what we spend every year. There's a very good argument to be made that you could spend less now and worry about not spending more later. But the financing of the American Revolution helping, and as Athar, you said, we're not in a revolutionary stance, so we don't really have that to worry about. But there does seem to me to be this thing. Bottom line's got this joke. If America had a credit card, we'd be out. The fucking company that called us and gone, you want maxed out. And I'm not saying we can't do that. I'm saying looking at America's support in that area and imperial largesse and what's good for the national interest of the United States has to partially be judged in how much it costs us. As cold, clinical, and calculating as that is, I think it is an important notion. What does this cost the United States? What do we get out of it down the line? Not a pure, Trumpian, hey, you give me $12 and, we'll do business. $12 being the high amount, basically. More, we have to be aware of, what we spend. And in the French example, we continue to spend, and the American public, like it or not, under both Trump administrations, is like to spend quite a lot of money. And so that
would you
that
say
can,
Iraq? What would you say Iraq was less analogous than maybe the 1979 regime overturn in terms of just troops, investment, all of those things? I think that was more apples to apples.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a much better point, Pete. Thank you. Please, somebody, go ahead. I've talked too long.
Oh, no, it was interesting. Thanks, Marshall. Okay, Blake. I'm sorry, Marshall, I was just asking a question. If you have more to say, please continue. Otherwise, anyone feel...
No, check your back channel, though. I need to know which I need to send. Just choose. I genuinely don't have the attachment, or I've had them for way too long.
Yeah, well, at the risk of being repetitive, now that we're looking at not whether the U.S. involved, but how much it will be involved based on the reaction and response that the regime will have, we are involved. 100%. We're in. As far as what we have to respond to economically with the streets being blocked, and now the effect that it will have on potentially, at least in the short term, the global economy and what that will mean. But also in terms of how we respond militarily, if there's any military response by the regime against U.S. interests, either in the region or elsewhere. So we need to think about what is the overall U.S. objective in being involved, other than the elimination of these nuclear development capability. Other than that, because that's done. and we know we're not done in terms of walking away done. Like, okay, good, job done, mission accomplished, you know, pat each other's back and say thank you for the congratulatory remarks, BB. That's not what we're to have. That's not what's happening now. What's happening now is a lot of hurry up and wait and see. Not just what's going to happen diplomatically at the UN and whatever overtures they have coming out of Tehran with Moscow, Tehran to Beijing, Tehran to whoever other countries will ally with them, and also how that plays against the United States. And so, what is the objective? If the objective is regime change, because once you're into it with the regime, you got to finish the job.
I'm going to narrow it down a little bit. What is United States vital national security interest? In the light of my favorite quote, Lord Palmerston, Great Britain has no permanent friends, only permanent interests. So what are the United States permanent interests in getting involved? I consider this a great question, so thank you for asking it.
Exactly. And for someone who has worked in areas of foreign policy, when we have a declared objective, whether it's an engagement or a longer-term relationship, there is something specific that we are hoping to attain out of it. And it is not, in the best sense, transactional. It is something usually mutually beneficial to be able to engage in that relationship. And there are times that people kind of boil it down to something simplistic and say, oh, the only reason we do something is, you know, one commodity, oil, or that the only reason we do one thing is to show our strength and our might. And this is extremely oversimplistic. So, and then to add even more complexity to it, when you say this is your stated objective, let's say it's to eliminate a certain capability of a certain country in this case, you have to know what's the follow-on action, because when people engage, when people within our government takes this action, this is something that is one of many contingency plans that were already put in place, sometimes for months or years, ready to go. So should something happen. So if you're wondering what a lot of these strategic planners are doing in the military and in foreign policy circles, they're a lot of times, in addition to doing their day-to-day work, they're also planning a lot of what ifs. What if we go to war with Russia? What if we go to war with China over Taiwan? What if Iran actually develops a nuclear weapon? What do we think we're going to do? And you and I, we're not in the circle to be able to know whether, in fact, Iran was actually very close, because we know that on two separate occasions prior to this, Netanyahu gave public and for an international audience, I think one in 2008, one 11 or 12, to say that Iran was 30 days away from building a nuclear weapon. This was said before. And then we had a few months ago, or whatever it was before, tensions were building up towards with Iran, and they were about to go into the negotiations for the nuclear deal. He checked in, and Tulsi Gabbard actually reported to our Congress that no, Iran is not close. She's backtracked on that, but I think that's more out of an act of loyalty than anything else. Oh yeah, I'm 100% supporting our president. Of course you are. You want to keep your job. So we don't know to what extent the threat was actually there. But the point is, the action was taken, and now the U.S. has to think, what are the contingency plans, or what are the actions that we're going to take afterwards? And what are we actually trying to achieve? Because if we get drawn into something bigger, then you're in. And you're in for the longer haul. And this would not be the first time in American history that military actions have led to something much deeper than we anticipated.
So there are three things that occur to me. Number one, you said you worked in the foreign policy sphere. I'm imagining you did for the country. What did you do for us, if you don't mind sharing? Not that that's for you.
Yeah.
I'm imagining you served the country. I'm curious what your service was.
Yeah, I was never in the military. I did not serve active duty service in my entire career, which was 36 years in the U.S. government. The last 15 years of my career, and what you see there, that picture of me is at my retirement 4 years ago. And I was an international affairs advisor for an agency within the Department of Homeland Security. So I covered the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. That was my role. So my role in my position was to advise senior military officers, because we have military officers in the Department of Homeland Security. You may not know that the U.S. Coast Guard is an international maritime organization, and we are part of the intelligence community, and we are part of the foreign policy community. We're part of our security apparatus, our maritime security apparatus.
I am one of the rare people who know. I can't claim that's because I'm smart. I can only claim that's because I have a brother that works in Congress.
Yeah.
And the Coast Guard has been in his portfolio.
Yeah, so we have Coast Guard members in Bahrain. We have Coast Guard members in Saudi Arabia. There are not a lot of them, but we have there. So that's what I did. That's what I did the last 15 years of my career.
So the Coast Guard is what, the world's like 6th or 8th largest navy on its own, something like that?
We are actually bigger than the British Navy in terms of personnel. And the other thing you need to know about the U.S. Coast Guard, the other thing you need to know is that because we straddle both the civilian and military environments, and we have certain authorities that the military does not. That's actually part of our authorities that are constitutionally given. That, for example, the Navy cannot conduct arrests, cannot conduct maritime law enforcement. So whenever there's a Navy ship...
My younger brother, I don't know if they did this when you were around. You said 4 years ago, so this is probably before he got to this. But he's in Cruz's office, and he's now on Commerce. But he made it so that people in Texas had to go to the Coast Guard facilities to check them out. Staff did. Any staff that had any portfolio that had anything to do with the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
You were making a trip to Corpus Christi Naval Air Station. You were making a trip to Galveston. You were making a trip to Houston, and you were seeing what the Coast Guard needed. He has been quite let's big champion for it.
Sure, and let's keep it international and let's keep it regional to this region. So when we look at this region and we look at the world's demands on certain capabilities that they need to have to enforce their maritime borders, to conduct maritime law enforcement, to conduct port security, to conduct certain operations, the vast majority of entities who do that globally are actually navies. And that's who we cooperate with, and that's who we support, and that's how we train sometimes or provide assistance to. And so that was, I don't want to go too deep into what the Coast Guard does, but that's what I did.
No, you're absolutely fine. I'm mentioning my brother was not for me, it was more for you, noting that I think Congress has been not paying enough attention to the Coast Guard, and this was intended to be he's paying attention to you guys.
We're one of the few agencies that everybody on both sides of the aisle love. They love the Coast Guard. We are small.
So the Coast Guard has taken him out in several helicopters to see a couple of different places they patrol. They got to go out on the ship that's got the sail. I don't know if that's the USS Constitution or if that's the one that's in port. I can never remember.
Okay. Well, getting back to the region, I've visited the region. I've visited other members of our foreign counterparts in some of these countries. I covered the region, and if there were issues that arose with Iran, I would be able to advise our senior leadership about them. but of course we did not have direct relations with Iran. And the other thing that we have to understand is that there's no such thing as a U.S. Coast Guard foreign policy. We are there to support our foreign policy as determined by the State Department. And we do provide some sort of subject matter expertise, and there are certain areas in which we cooperate with certain countries, even though we don't have significant relations with them, because we want them to have certain abilities, such as being able to conduct search and rescue operations, or being able to rescue people offshore, or to respond to maritime accidents. So we'll do that with even countries that we don't have relations. And so in that sense, we're a really very different tool than, say, any agency and any service within Department of Defense. So that's one of the reasons they love us. And also, we're small and we're relatively nimble. And that's it in a nutshell. I don't want to go too much into my whole biography because it ain't that interesting.
He likes you because he thinks you're undervalued.
Pardon me?
My little brother likes you because he thinks you're undervalued. And he likes people that provide more value than they pay you for.
Yeah.
That's been his thing. But back to the region here. So
yeah. So
for the topic.
That my experience allowed me to get a certain degree of familiarity with those governments. I dealt with the Egyptian government. I dealt with the Qatari government, the Saudi government, the UAE government, the government in Kuwait, the government of Iraq. I've also dealt directly with, because I also covered Europe. I was covering and interacting with members of the Ukrainian border guard, which is also one of those first points of attack that the Russians were going after the war started. So there was a lot of things that I was able to do that were pretty insightful about how these countries and services operated and worked, and how we could cooperate with them. Now, Iran was not one of those countries, because we didn't have direct relations and we didn't have any direct support, and that was cut off many years ago. Let's see, let me figure out the year. I think it was 1979. So so since then, Iran has developed in many other ways and has continued to improve, but as a regime, it has only exercised more and more autocracy, more and more control, more and more brutality, and more undermining of regional other countries in the region. You can call that terrorism, you can call that whatever, you can call that proxy wars. They did do that. And they did it, and also they were doing it through the support of Syria until the fall of the Syrian regime. So it's a messy place, but you can understand it if you spend enough time. How many of you would honestly say that you spend time actually trying to understand the region? Because it's not your job. Why would you? Right? But
I don't think there are many Americans that could point out to you Afghanistan or Iran on the map, if I'm being fair.
But what we can do, what all of us can do, is be able to take a step back and say, okay, I'm not just going to kind of glean over the news and just look at a few sound bites or 30-second video or a speech and think I understand what the hell's going on. We need to stop doing that. At least try to understand a little bit. Get an understanding of the country, get an understanding of the people, meet some people. God damn, you're in Clubhouse. Come on.
Can I get something in there too?
Yeah, dude, it's just as soon as you get done, Dr. Wise.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Wise, please go ahead.
Well, I was trying to speak to the topic, because before the topic was ended of the should we support Israel, I definitely think we should. And people say, what does Israel do for us? If you guys like electronics, if you guys like, cell phones, laptops, microwaves, flat screen TVs, all that stuff goes through, the Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden. There's smartphones, laptops, tablets, game consoles, accessories like chargers, headphones, major brands like Apple, Samsung, and Sony rely on this route. Home appliances, microwaves, blenders, smart devices. I mean, semiconductors. You name it, guys. All this stuff goes through there, and Israel has repeatedly attacked the Houthi rebels to try to not only protect Israel but also protect the shipping. So they're doing the world a service, I would say. They did it in December 2024, May 2025, June 2025. There was a naval assault, and just recently, June 15th, 14th and 15th, actually, they attacked a Houthi leadership meeting. These are targeted strikes, man, to try to, limit this attack on international shipping. If you all, so I mean, I hear this so much. What does Israel do for us? What's the benefits? Well, guys, they're trying to do many things, but I have to say that's a huge benefit if you like anything that's coming through that area on a ship. Most of us are benefiting this.
This isn't meant to throw you off. It's just to register your notion of stats. And if you don't know, that's totally tight. You don't have to know. But do you know what percentage of world trade goes through the Suez Canal? Not to say
I don't know. It's probably still a lot. I mean, significant. A percentage doesn't mean nothing because it's still thousands of goods.
Between 12 and 15%.
That's significant.
Oh, dude, I'm not arguing with you that it is or it isn't. I was more, since you were talking about it, I was more noting, how much it was. Apparently for America, it's between 2 to 3%. Hey, Adnan, do you want to chip in? It seems like you're finally here. Adnan.
Yeah, hi guys.
Hey, Adnan.
Yeah, do you want to?
Adnan is a friend of mine. Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, thank you very much, Atar. How about you?
I'm doing well. It's I'm inside and it's hot outside.
We're doing well.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you. So, for my side, I guess I take issue with war because it is not a solution. War, I guess, exacerbate everything. I guess back in the day, America invaded the Iraq war. I guess it's a kind of a problem. So for that things, it's the war need to make a compromise, democratic way, because in the war, innocent people die every single day. So I'm from Turkey, by the way. Our area is surrounded by the war. Ukraine, Russia, right now,
what part of Turkey?
Istanbul.
Dude.
I am from Istanbul.
I am jealous. And I am not a practicing Muslim, I'm a Christian. One of the most beautiful muezzin calls I have ever heard is the Grand Mosque in Istanbul. Its muezzin is just mesmerizing. For those who are unaware, a muezzin is a call to prayer, and it's done in Arabic. And I don't know if you think that stuff is weird. I guess you think it's weird, but I think you can be of another religion and find somebody else's religion's incantations just absolutely beautiful. Which, if you never have, I really would suggest going to Google or YouTube and looking up Grand Mosque in Istanbul for the muezzin. It really is just beautiful.
Yes, thank you very much. So I guess the war will finish soon, I hope, because it is bad things for humanity, economically, socially, I guess, everything. So, and also maybe my concern is, I guess, maybe Russia, maybe China support to Iran also. So maybe the bad scenario, I guess, third war will maybe be happen down the line. It is, I guess, the conflict. It is the bad things for the humanity. For that things, I guess I don't know the Trump what idea. So Pentagon said some things about the war. They prepared for the war, not for the conflict. So I guess we will figure it out in order to find a solution, not the war. Maybe talking, listening to each other. I guess listening to the most important thing, because listen to each other. Maybe Iran cancel, maybe call off their nuclear things. So for the things, I guess the peace is the best way for my side. Thank you.
Nice. I have a question. Have you ever been to Göbekli Tepe? I'm really hoping you have, because I've always wanted to see it. I'm kind of curious what it looks like. Göbekli Tepe is this site in the northeastern part of your country, and it rewrites the agreement on settled human history by about 3,000 to 4,000 years. So typically, historians arrive at 10,000 BC is the date that we settled and became domesticated. But Göbekli Tepe goes back to 13 or 14,000 years ago, and there was no river right next to it. Have you ever been? Have you ever had the opportunity? That's to you, Adnan.
Yeah, I haven't been there. So
What about have you ever been to Pergamum?
where?
Pergamum. It's an old Anatolian city from the ancient world. Y'all probably don't call it Pergamum these days. So let me look it up real quick.
And can you repeat the question because I
I was curious if you had been to an ancient city on the Anatolian plateau. We probably need to get back to the topic. I can hear myself going down rabbit holes now.
Well, let me see if I can bring it back.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So here's a couple of interesting things to think about as we talk about Israel, or we talk about whether you support the actions or whether we should, be able to take it further, and eventually, if the Iranian regime responds, that we eventually go to the point of actually changing regimes. Every situation that we try to understand has many dimensions to it. And we think we kind of can distill it down to a simple thing like, there's a certain degree of military support we give Israel, and therefore they help us secure the region, or that they're a loyal partner in addressing those security concerns, or that it's economic because of what we do with them economically and technology and building our not just our defense industries but other industries, that there's a cooperation there. That's maybe one or two of those dimensions, but there are others. And one of those other ones is what are the domestic politics? Because, prior to the October events and obviously it was horrific, 1,200 people were murdered by Hamas. And then there was the response. Prior to those events in October, a little over a year and a half ago, there were mass protests on the streets all over Israel against their own government due to some changes that they were making, which was taking the country not just further to the right, but kind of
They were taking their...
Right. It was about their judicial systems and how they were going to be independent versus not, and also, and he was losing popularity himself. That was a fact. You can look it up. I don't have to make anything up. You can check it. So there was a great deal of there was a sense that he was in political trouble. Then after the attack, that kind of simmered a bit, and they said, oh yeah, obviously it warranted a response. No issue there. But the extent of the response was more and more significant. People started to ask within the domestic political environment as to what's the outcome, what is the overarching goal, where are we going with this, and how far do you want to go, as 5,000 people were killed, 10,000 people were killed, 20,000, and now we're at 50 plus thousand. And so many people were killed, and then as Trump came in, people were saying, okay, we got to get the food to the civilians and get them out there and get the food in, and then they started shooting at people who were getting food. Now, the only reason I bring this up is that there's a fair point to be made that the military actions, and by the way, Israel's not the only country that does this. We we also had political leaders in our country that took military actions at times in which they were politically vulnerable. And it shored them up a bit. It allowed them to continue to stay. Because now you got to conclude all these military actions, and the people who are jingoistic and the people who are, you got to get these people, they start to rise up and say, yeah, we need to do something about all these people who are killed and murdered. Just like we did after post 9/11, again, legitimately responding, and then you go after one country, you go after another country, you go into Iraq, which had nothing to do actually with 9/11, but again, they kind of conflated those issues.
Nothing.
Right. So you go deeper and deeper, and then people go, what the hell are you doing? We want this war to end. We want to get out of Iraq. So similarly, other countries do this, and they do this for a variety of reasons. And some of them are legitimate. Some of them are politically motivated. Yeah. Let me just conclude what I'm saying, and then you can.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So you have this other dimension, and it's not just about. Do we, and when I say we, you're talking about the U.S. administration per the individuals who are currently in those positions, right? Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, who actually give contradictory information about, for example, Iran. And then you have other individuals at the State Department who's more of I dare say, kind of more of a yes man. So Rubio is like all on board. And so you have all these individuals while members of Congress saying, hold on, we need to kind of sort these things through. And so you always have these sort of domestic issues. And so if we say,
to the statement made by...
Last thing I'll say, let me just finish this. When we say we support Israel, we, as a country, for everything they're doing, and including the actions in Iran, we have to be careful because you got to parse a lot of things out. And then you say, well, we like this, but that doesn't align with our interests. And also, there's a lot of innocent people being killed here. So you got to look at it overall, and that I think is more going to be more informative. Thank you.
So I gotta ask the question that is begging in your analysis. I don't like the fact that I have to ask the question. I'm a Republican. It's inconvenient that I have to ask the question. But you have expressed not just reticence, but some judgment over how Israel has pursued its war. Do you think that the Israelis, and this is Jay's space, Jay is a Jew, this is a pro-Israeli space.
Dude, everybody here is so fucking cracked and whack.
Do you believe that the Israelis' effect of what they have done over the last several months, I hate the fact that I have to ask this question, but it's begging. Do you think it's a genocide, or do you think that language is overplayed and not serious? I just gave, it begs for the question.
For me, that's a very easy question to answer.
You noting
go ahead. Yeah, I got your
noting your experience.
I got your question.
The U.S. government.
It's a very easy question to answer. When this administration can specifically refer and use the word genocide for 50 Afrikaner farmers who they welcome as refugees from South Africa, if they can refer to them as subjects of genocide, and there's no doubt comparatively at all that any